Man, I love that intro so much. You guys got a real sexy intro there, Legs. I swear, man. I'm kind of jealous.
It's cool,
about
man.
that.
Definitely gets me going. I love it too. It's cool.
Welcome to the All NBA podcast. That's Tim Legler. I'm Saul Bookman. And as always, we're brought to you by the good folks at DraftKings Sportsbook. Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with code ALLNBA because life's more fun when you're in on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. Legs, do you have your Louis Vuitton sponsorship as well today?
Yeah, exactly. I have it, man. You got it. No doubt about it.
Because Wemby just signed a deal with Louis Vuitton.
I know he did.
Look at him.
I saw that.
That's pretty sweet right there. I wish I could get my hands on some of that Louis Vuitton money for sure. But some of these guys, I wanted to start off this show about mentality. We talked a little bit about the All-Star game and, reasons why or why not guys want to play hard and all that good stuff. But then I thought, you know what? It's over. Let's move on to the next part of this season. And there's a mentality that goes into this. Not only the mentality going into the season in general, but then the mentality to come back from a little break, going into the second part of the season, and the differences between the teams that are the players that are going into the second half with the potential of a playoff spot and the players that are not, and what they each what the mindset of each of them is. So let's start off with, from your perspective and knowledge, when you thought about coming back from the All-Star break, what kind of mindset is there just in general about getting ready for the second part of the season? Because I imagine you had a shorter break when you were playing. This is a week-long break. It's about double what it used to be. And there's a little bit of a shift that you have to get ready for on the way back.
Yeah, we used to come back on, and the games would be Tuesday. Pretty much almost the entire league would be playing Tuesday. So if you participated in the weekend, you get out of there on Monday morning. Like you're meeting up. If you're on the road, you're meeting up with your team on the road, on Monday and probably going through a practice that night and then playing the next day, or you fly home and same thing. In this case, you get a couple extra days. You don't start playing on Thursday, and it's not everybody's going to play Thursday. Some guys will get till Friday before you play against it. Yeah, it's a nice long break. I think and obviously we've talked a lot about what All-Star Weekend looks like in terms of guys and the way they treat it. And probably the biggest rigor is just physical demands on the time of the actual All-Star game participants, and not even all those guys. The demands on their time is not the same. Those top of the food chain guys that everybody wants to get a piece of, they do have a lot of demands on their time, but physically you're not exerted that much. It's more mentally draining for those guys. That part of it, it's all about what it's become is everybody gets to energize themselves and preserve their legs. That's really what it's become. And now you come out of it and you have a few days, rest of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're playing on Thursday. So you have a massive amount of adrenaline right now. And there's three tiers in the league. There's the top tier teams that you're going to be in the playoffs, and you're not playing. You're top 4 or 5 in the conference. You're not, worried about some playing situation or just scrambling to get in at the end. So that's one tier. Then you got the middle ground, which are those teams 6 through 9, 10, where you kind of hope that you're going to be in playoff mix. You're good enough to compete. You're in that 500 type range for the most part, or a little bit better. And, maybe you just added some pieces, who knows, and you're starting to incorporate them and you're just trying to get in and see what happens. It's a good experience for your team to get in. And then you've got the bottom feeders. So you got that group of teams that are either going to be fighting for the last play-in spot, if that, or they know that that's probably not realistic. all they're focused on is basically continuing to evaluate talent, to give guys more opportunities here on these last 25 games and see what they have so they can make decisions going into the summer, give guys a little bit of chance to get their feet wet. So you have three different mentalities around it. Either way you slice it for those top two groups, you're looking at it now as it's basically, you understand, a sprint here to the finish, trying to get yourselves right, hit your peak, find your rhythm, play your best basketball, get everybody healthy. So when April 15th gets here, you're ready. And if you're the top 4 or 5 teams we're talking about on this list, you're expecting a 2-month run. So that's your mentality going into it from the beginning. I think outside of those top teams, and this year maybe it's more than 4 or 5 because of the West and what some of those teams have added. Maybe the list is longer. Like Boston's probably in that group. Cleveland, Milwaukee, the Knicks are now in that group. I don't know if Philadelphia considers themselves there anymore with what happened to Embiid, and Indiana's probably not. So you have 4 in the East. The West, you got Minnesota, Oklahoma City, the Clippers, Nuggets for sure, the Suns for sure, Dallas for sure, and then even teams like the Lakers, Warriors, and Pelicans. So you might have as many as 10 teams in the West. So that's literally almost half the league are preparing for what they think could be a 2-month run. Because even a team like Golden State, they think they can make magic happen when the time gets here. Lakers think the same thing. So there literally are that many teams, and you're just trying to time it out so you're playing your best basketball when that time of the year gets here and everybody is healthy. That's really the mentality for those teams.
When you're talking about like that off time, okay, as in terms of what you know about players right now, okay, you have basically 6 days off from the last time they played to Thursday when most of them get back on the court. I know they take vacation. I know they like try to get away and they try to decompress and whatever. Is there still training that goes on in that 6-day period, you think?
Yeah, you can't step away completely. You're going to get some training in. It depends on the stage of your career. If you're a little bit more seasoned vet, you know what I mean? It's not as critical for you to get in the gym and like work on your game. But you've got to do something in that time from a workout standpoint. And it's not going to be every day, but you got to get something in. The younger players, they're probably going to, if they're not participating in the weekend, especially, that you don't want a guy that's, 21, 22, 23 years old that's maybe borderline rotation player for you or a lower rotation player for you, whatever it may be, to take a week and go away to an all-inclusive resort somewhere and just chill. That's not what these organizations are looking for. So those guys are going to definitely continue to work out. The top-tier guys, who knows? Like those top guys, they might not get anything done and come back, and they know they're good enough. They'll find their rhythm in a couple of games. They'll be back in their rhythm. They're not going to lose too much wind in that time. But I think that's mostly reserved for those top guys who have incredible demands put on them every night when they play to be everything to their teams. Those guys probably need a break, man, mentally and physically. But that's not certainly the majority of the league. I mean, guys still have to continue to work, and the younger guys are going to be forced to work. Their break's going to be a little bit shorter. They're going to rejoin the team and get back to the facility before other guys are expected to, and then get back in your daily routine. Because I think what happens with some of those guys on the better teams, it's pounded in their head at all times. Let's say you are anywhere from 10 through 12 on an NBA roster. Like that's your pecking order. So you're probably not in the nightly rotation, but you've had some moments throughout the year, right? Guys get hurt, you get a little bit more opportunity. For the most part, you're not really expecting to play in the playoffs. What is pounded into their head by the coaching staff, the organization, you might be called on. And the importance of the moment is going to be so critical if we just need an 8-minute stretch out of you, in a given time or 2 6-minute stretches in each half because somebody's in foul trouble or somebody got hurt. And, we might need you. You could be a pivotal player. So it's just constantly never taking your foot off the gas with those players, keeping them ready. And it's not easy to do when you're not playing every night.
That's fascinating to hear. I always think about as the season goes along, some of these teams that, as you said, the bottom feeders, right? I I can't even imagine, a team like, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but Detroit, right? They've gone through it this year. It's been a struggle. They haven't won, as many games as I'm sure they would have hoped for, and having to stay in it, and I think it's hard for us that have never played in the NBA to understand the grind of an 82 game season. And then you combat that with, not playing as well. The expectations have not been reached. You're one of the worst teams in the league. I don't know if you've ever experienced it quite to that level, but like in terms of a team that really has no hope of making the playoffs, what do you think players are trying to tell themselves to stay in the moment? I know it's a profession. It's easier said than done sometimes, though, knowing that you're a professional basketball player, you're getting paid to do a job, but still it's human nature to be a little despondent about, the lack of success and trying to figure out your way through it.
Absolutely was on a team like that in Dallas. We were the youngest team in the league. We were the worst team in the league. First half of the year was just sort of like what the Pistons went through this year. And so what happens in that situation, it's really just your inner pride and your professionalism, right? And for some of those guys, that was a mix of guys. Like for a guy like myself, that was about my 4th year out of school. And at that point, I was an undrafted player. I was overseas. I was in the CBA. I'd played in every league imaginable and been all over the world trying to chase my dream and get to the league. And now I'm in Dallas, and we got a mix of guys like myself in a similar boat. We had lottery picks. They had like 3 lottery picks 3 years in a row. So you had those type of guys. Then you had other guys like late first round, second round type picks filling out the middle of the roster. So everybody was kind of in a different boat. The top guys that were the lottery picks, like they were the ones that like the organization was most invested in. They were the ones taking the brunt of the criticism. They were the ones taking the brunt of everything. So but listen, I'll be honest with you. We didn't have the hardest workers necessarily in some of those guys, and their careers were short as a result. You had a guy like myself. I'm walking in every day. We're losing. I'm trying to get more minutes and establish myself that I belong in this league and I'm going to have a long career in the league at the time. What happens is you just develop a mentality. I remember this, Derek Harper was my teammate beginning of the year. We traded him to the Knicks that year for Tony Campbell. Mm-hmm. Derek Harper went to the Knicks. I think the following season, that Knicks team went to the NBA Finals. Like he was a missing piece for them. He was our best player. He was our one established veteran player we had. Everybody else was young, trying to figure things out. He pulled me aside when it was bad. And I think he knew at that point he was going to force his way out. He wanted to go. And he told me something I never forgot. He said, remember this, every single time you go on a court in the NBA, your jersey says one thing, but you are playing for the entire league. Every time you play, and never forget that. So you can get wrapped up in your circumstances. Your minutes aren't enough. You don't like the coach, whatever it may be. And you can get wrapped up in that to where you become this like sort of, miserable malcontent, and you're kind of like resentful. And then you're just not laser focused like you need to be. You have to look outside of your current situation to understand that there will be another opportunity, whether it's with that organization and you'll be on a better team because they get it together over the next couple of years, or there's an opportunity on another team that's watching you that you might be a piece that they need. And maybe you don't even play as many minutes on the next team, but it's more important minutes because they're good. And so that's the advice he gave me, and I never forgot it. And that's the way I always looked at it. I assumed that everybody was watching my body language. Everybody was watching my effort. Everybody was watching my interaction with my teammates, my coaches. Everybody was watching everybody was studying you around the league. And as long as you take that approach, you're going to be fine. And you're going to, your talent will dictate whether or not ultimately you can swim in that league. Are you going to sink or swim? And for me, fortunately, that was the beginning of like a 10-year career. That was like right in the beginning. And it really happened for me after that when I got to Washington. But I got a chance to play really good minutes 2 years in a row in Dallas and on 2 not very good teams. But I was able to prove to the rest of the league that I belonged and I had a skill set that could help somebody else. And that's really the mentality I took into it every day. And stop looking at the standings. Stop worrying about crowd reaction. Don't look at what the media is saying. Show up, do your job, work hard, and ultimately your talent will dictate whether or not you can survive.
That's a phenomenal perspective, Legs. I always wondered, I was around the Suns in 2018 when they only won 19 games that year. DA's first year there, and Booker had been there established already, but it was a rough season. And I was always impressed because let me say this. I couldn't tell if when I was watching them in practice and how they still remained loose. They still remained, they weren't, it didn't feel like they were losing perspective or focus. It just felt like they had to stay loose because it was already a tense situation with the lack of wins that they were getting all season. Well, then you flip that, and a couple years later, they make their finals run. And after that, being able to peek inside the curtain, and it's a focus, but still kind of relatively that same kind of loosey-goosey, kind of like, hey, we need to stay relaxed while we push towards the end of this season. On the flip side of that, for you, Legs, when you were going down the stretch of the season, when you had this break, was there anything that you thought like, oh man, over this course of the next 4 or 5 days, I really want to try and work on this because I've been struggling at this? Or was it just like, that'll work itself out as the season goes along? I just need to continue to just get in the gym and put up reps.
Yeah, I don't think you went the latter route with that. You kind of just, at that point, that late in the year, it's kind of just, this is what it is, and you just got to continue to grind it. I want to say something about the point you just made about the loosiness and loosey-goosiness, right, and keeping things relaxed when things aren't going well. Here I'll tell you what's a big difference. That's allowed to happen now because the mentality of the interaction between coaches and players is completely different than when I played.
Yeah.
Where that is such an adapted mind view and ideology in the way that you handle players and the catering to players. And like, you're just constantly aware of that. And the players have far more power than they've ever had before in that regard. When I played, it was a little bit different, man. Coaches came in irritated. They're mad. They're embarrassed that you're losing. And it was, I remember one practice in particular in Dallas. They literally, the coaches were so disgusted with us 30, 40 minutes in because of the lack of concentration on some of our guys that they left. The coaches left. And they said, you know what? You guys know so much. You run practice. We can't watch this anymore. The whole staff walked out of the gym. And this is to tell you like how fractured things can be. So here they go. They leave the gym. And we're all looking around at each other. And here's what's nuts. You had 5, 6 guys say,
leave.
All right, they're out. We're out. Cool. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go home, man. I got stuff to do. I'm gonna go get on my Xbox, like whatever. You had another group of guys that were like, no, man, we got to stay here and get something done, man. They're right. They were right. This is a joke. Like, we got to get after it. And I remember that day we had like 9 guys stay, and we played like 3-on-3 cutthroat. So you score, you stay on. You get scored on, those 3 guys step off. And it turned into one of the most physical and intense practices we had all year because of the competitive nature of it and how irritated guys were and just tired of that malaise hanging over you. And so the mentality was just different. Coaches was more like foot up rear end type mentality, man. And like, you never felt comfortable. Now it's a little different. I think the approach is more like what you're talking about. So I just wanted to say that perspective because it was a different time. And look, all you can do, it gets to the point where you stop worrying about looking at the standings and the wins and losses. You literally focus solely on your own job, responsibility, and assignment, what they're asking you to do it the best you can, and figuring out how to get better. And showing up every day, and do not change your routine for anything. And you try to get through it. And then you get to those last couple games. I swear there were guys that would show up that didn't live in Dallas, that were headed home in the offseason. We got to that last game of the year at home. I swear guys rolled in there with like U-Hauls attached to the back of their car. Like they were going to be skid marks in the parking lot, like getting out of there to get back home, skip exit meetings, like the whole bit. Because you just want to put it behind you. And that's the great thing about the summer, right? And the great thing about training camp. Like, think about how optimistic everybody in the league is on media day, right? Everybody's excited on media day because you all think you're going to go out there and have a chance to compete. And then for some teams, a month in, 2 months in, reality sets in that this is what this is going to be. And you got to look in the mirror and figure out, what am I going to make out of this? That's really what it comes down to, man. Personal pride and survival and what you are trying to accomplish as a player in your career.
Wow, that the U-Haul. I could just picture that right now. Some of these players that I've come across in the league.
Yeah, man.
Well,
Peace out.
Well, hey, before we move on to the next topic, obviously, we want to go ahead and tell you a little bit something about the DraftKings Sportsbook app. The DraftKings Sportsbook app. It is NBA season right now, folks, and it is in full swing. You can go ahead and spice up your betting lines at the DraftKings Sportsbook app by going and downloading the app and putting $5 and getting $200 instantly in bonus bets for any new customers by using promo code ALLNBA. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app with promo code ALLNBA. New customers can get just $5 on the NBA and get $200 instantly in bonus bets by using that promo code. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 878-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for gambling problem. Call 888-789-777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Blue Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 or over, varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/basketball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right. Well, this is Legs, after yesterday's show, we kind of talked about, what are we going to talk about today, and there's always, at some point of the season, there's always a player that steps up that maybe nobody really focused on during the year, and they have an impact. I remember against the Suns in the 21 finals, it just felt like Bobby Portis was that dude for the Bucks. You got Giannis, you got Middleton, and you had Drew Holiday, but man, Bobby Portis hit clutch shot after clutch shot, it felt like, and I wanted to get to those kind of guys. Those guys, as we come down the stretch of the season, that could have a significant impact. And Legs, I'll start off with
Okay.
Naz Reid. I think Naz Reid, he's a versatile big man. He doesn't play great in terms of efficiency shooting wise, but he is shooting a phenomenal percentage from three right now at 42%. So a big that can stretch the floor. He kind of does a little bit of the dirty work for Minnesota in a team that I think when you get into the grime of the playoffs, you need those kind of grit and grimy guys to step up. And when you have one that can not only do that, but can also play from the perimeter and has got the length to be able to guard versatile positions, I think Naz Reid is a slept-on person, and I think a lot of players understand the value that he brings to the table. We saw a little bit of that last year against the Lakers in the playoffs, in the play-in tournament. What say you about Naz Reid?
I love that pick. I swear I love that pick. I'm not kind of mad I didn't pick him now. I didn't take that name, man. Like, you came up with him. I'm kind of jealous right now because he's been that for me all year. Interesting story. I actually coached against Naz Reid on the AAU level.
Okay.
He was a year younger than my team. But he was playing up. Him and a guy named Javon Quinterly, a point guard that was a 5-star, went to Villanova. He ended up at 3 schools. He went to Villanova. He went to Alabama.
He signed at Arizona first, and then
Right,
decommitted because of the whole FBI stuff.
Nova, Alabama. I mean, he's all over the place.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the point guard and the center on Sports U, a high-level AAU Under Armour program from North Jersey. We were in South Jersey. We played him 3-4 times. I couldn't beat him, and finally we got him. We beat him. And I didn't know where these guys were headed at the time. I mean, my guys were 17. Those 2 kids were 16. You don't know how it's going to go. I knew they were 5-star recruits, but I didn't know how that was going to go for either player. You look up Javon Quinterly, his career, he ended up being a good college player, but it took him 3 programs to find that. Yeah. Naz Reid, look at what he's doing now at the NBA level, and I'm amazed by it. I tell this story all the time because it's kind of cool. Like, my players that I coach, my son was on that team. Like, just cool that like Naz Reid was on that team that we beat, and now look what he's doing for Minnesota. I love this selection. The thing I love about Naz Reid is it depends on what you might need on a given night. He will check that box. If you need him to be the more versatile, fleet-footed big on the perimeter, that could jump out if you're having problems defending pick and roll or whatever it may be. Like, he can be that guy for you. Do you need him to be a guy that just absolutely energizes the crowd, as most reserves do that have that kind of impact? They just seem like they carry more weight because the crowd can't wait when they see him get up to check in the game. The crowd's anticipating they're going to do something. So he gives you points, net rating points, because of his energy alone. And then the last thing he can do, flat out shoot the basketball if that's what it takes on a given night. You know, you need a 12, 15, 18-point game out of Naz Reid in a tight spot. You're going to get it. And so I just love his versatility. And, you know, he wasn't an outside shooter like back when he was 16. I coached against him. He was a post player, obviously. He was a dominant 6'9" kid at that age, athletic, like you couldn't really stop him in the paint. And he protected the rim. It was hard to get there if he was on the court. You fast forward and look what he's become. Like this 20 out to 25-foot stretch shooter, and the versatility he's added to his game. So I think that's an absolutely excellent one. And I agree with you. He's going to have a lot to say about what Minnesota does in the postseason. All right, my first one, and this is an interesting one because I think a lot of people thought when the OG Anunoby trade went down for the Knicks that this guy was a throw-in. Precious Achiuwa.
Oh.
So, right? He was playing
Precious
for Toronto, but he wasn't really like, you know, he wasn't really and nobody was really watching a lot of the Raptors like this year. They were a mediocre team, and you weren't paying attention to him. And even if you did, he wasn't having this kind of impact. Well, he comes to the Knicks, and there's an opportunity immediately for him to get on the court. And look at what he has done since he's been there. I think he's had 7 double-digit rebounds in the last games in the last 12. In the month of February, Saul, he's averaging 14 points, 12 boards, and 2 blocks. I don't know how Tom Thibodeau is going to keep this guy's minutes down when Randall comes back. I know how important Julius Randle is, and they just added Bogdanovich, who's really a 4. I guess you could play him some at 3. Precious Achiuwa is a prototypical 4. And I'm curious to see what is Tibbs going to do, because he's averaging 41 minutes a game in February without Julius Randle. 41 minutes a game. And he's just yeoman's work, man. He never gives up on the offensive glass. He's a relentless defender. He finishes around the rim. And now you got, you know, just added Bogdanovich. You got Julius Randle coming back. You know, eventually you're going to get Mitchell Robinson into the mix with front court minutes. You've already got Hartenstein, who's been great for them. It might be a good problem to have all that depth, but it's also going to be a challenge for Tibbs. And I'm really curious to see what they do with Precious Achiuwa, because I have a feeling if they cut his minutes, it won't be for long. He's going to remind them of what he does. And by the way, I just said what Naz Reid does to energize. I think I can say the same thing about Precious Achiuwa in the Madison Square Garden. The Knick fans, Northeast Corridor City fans, Philly, Boston, New York, D.C., appreciate guys that play like Precious Achiuwa. End of story. And so I'm really curious. I'm calling the Celtics-Knicks game on ESPN radio this Saturday night at the Garden. And I can't wait to see this guy up close and see their team up close and see the energy in that building. And he provides a lot of that. So I just thought people aren't paying attention to this guy's numbers and what he's been doing for the Knicks. It's pretty astonishing.
Man, I love that pick. I'm just like you with Nas. I'm a little jealous that I didn't pick that as well, because I again, you want to talk about identity and city, and sometimes players just fit a mold of what the DNA and the city is all about. And Precious definitely fits that New York area. Listen, on paper, you think the Knicks should be one of the more physical teams in the front court in the league, and so I hope when Julius Randle comes back and you have this mix that they can actually do that, because Precious Achiuwa, in a different kind of way, I'm not saying it's an exact replica, but he gives me Charles Oakley vibes. You know what I mean? He's just kind of a tough guy. It feels like he doesn't put up with a lot of nonsense. He just gets after it. I love that pick. The other one I would go to, I'll stay on the East. And this guy's been going through it in terms of his run in Philadelphia. It's been up and down. He was highly criticized last year for kind of disappearing in parts in the playoffs. But Tobias Harris, I think it's kind of funny to say that, you know, what was kind of viewed as the third part of a trifecta when Harden and Embiid were there, and now Maxey and Embiid and Tobias Harris it's kind of weird to say that he was that third wheel and that he would be under the radar, but I just feel because of his playoff lack of success, especially a year ago, and the expectations I think that were placed upon him when he first got to Philadelphia, Tobias Harris to me could be that guy if Philadelphia doesn't fall apart, I should say. He's going to have a lot to do with it right now because he can keep this team afloat off of his skill set alone. He's a good shooter. He can score at various different levels. He's just found these cold streaks every now and then that have really hurt his team. And I think he has a tremendous opportunity to keep Philadelphia afloat without Embiid in the next, 2 months and get them get them to the playoffs. Because I'll tell you what, if Philadelphia hangs in there and they stay around and they're competitive and they're going to be maybe a top 60 still, I find it hard to believe that Embiid's not going to at least want to try and give it a go if he can physically to get back into the playoffs. So Tobias Harris, I think he has an opportunity to do something big. He's averaging 17.7, 6 and 3. He's got his second best field goal percentage in his career right now this season. And so I think Tobias Harris has a lot to prove. He's been playing decently well this season. I think he has a tremendous opportunity to step up.
Love this one too. And, I'm very familiar with this market because I lived there for so long and went to school there and been in that area for a long, long time. Very familiar with the fan base there, very familiar with the media that covers that team. And I think Tobias Harris has, to me, been the target in a lot of ways, unfairly so, as a scapegoat for things that go wrong with that team. And I just don't get it when you look at his production. Look, I understand he has had some moments in the postseason where, and you could pick a game or two in a series where he's real quiet, right? And you averaged 18 in the regular season, close to it this year. You're at over 50% from the field, 7 boards. Those are great numbers. He's a 90% foul shooter. His 3-point shooting percentage is down this year relative to like what he normally does. I think it's his lowest percentage in about 5 years, but he's like only been over 40 one or two times in his career. He's typically in that 37, 38 range. Like that's where he is. He's at 34 this year. So it's just down a little bit. And look, some of that might have to do with the emergence of a Tyrese Maxey, right? So the flow of the offense a little bit different. So maybe the touches are somewhat different with Maxey. So, I'm not going to, berate that point. He's down a few points from the three. Big deal. That's not his game anyway. He's a mid-range jump shooter. He's a post-up turnaround jump shooter over smaller guys. He's a mid-range off the dribble, one bounce, pull-up jump shooter. Like that's what he does really well. He gets picked on, man. When they struggle on a night he has a bad game and they lose, it doesn't matter what Embiid did or Maxey and how bad they could have been. They're coming at Tobias Harris in that market. I'm just telling you. And so that hasn't been easy for him. And he's alluded to it before. I remember at one point last year, he had a comment that said they would trade him for something. It was like some food reference, like a dozen donuts or something. Like that's how he felt about his relationship with the fans and the media there. And that got a lot of play, which didn't make it easier on him at home, believe me. But I look at it and I look at his postseason. So the bottom line is this, you're right. When it matters, and it might not be this year because of the Embiid situation, whenever they get back to say next year, they got Maxey, he's still there, and they got Maxey, Embiid, Buddy Hield, if he's still there, you got to show up. Like you can't have that night when they lose and you give them a 4-point game. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff that people harp on and they don't forget. And that's really been his only problem. So I like that one. I think he's going to have a lot to do with what goes on with Philadelphia one way or another. More importantly, obviously, if Embiid comes back. All right, my next one, I'm going to go out west. And going into the season, the Denver Nuggets had question marks because they made some personnel changes. Some key guys that were on that team last year to help them to win a championship. Bruce Brown at the top of the list was no longer there. And Jeff Green, no longer there. Two important guys, one more of a veteran presence that also played in the postseason and had some spots. And then Bruce Brown was just consistently really good for them in a utility knife type role. Where was it going to come from? Because Christian Brown, was he ready to take that leap in his second year and be that consistent as we go into this postseason? And then the guy that's kind of emerged as a critical piece of this is Peyton Watson. And if you look at what Peyton Watson has been doing like throughout the year, started off a little bit slow with the minutes and kind of had to earn them and grab his way. and get his way into the rotation. Well, now pretty cemented. He's playing 20-plus minutes a night. And some nights he'll give you double-digit scoring. His shooting percentages are very good. It's 52% from the field in the month of February, 50% from the three-point line. So he's comfortable, and his shot volume isn't super high, so he's a little bit selective, but that's fine. He's not going to take bad shots and force the issue. He can give you that, though, and I think he's going to have some games in the postseason, Saul, where he gives you on a night when they need it for some reason, 15. Maybe that's a night Michael Porter Jr. struggles. Maybe that's a night Aaron Gordon doesn't give you, a good scoring number, which he does sometimes. Where's it going to come from? The supplemental offense for Jokic and Murray. Peyton Watson is that guy that can do it. And more importantly, they love his defense. They love his length. He's 6'8", long arm. When you look at some of the guys you're going to have to play, he's going to get some time on Luka Doncic. He's going to get some time on a guy like Kevin Durant. He's going to get some time on a Paul George. He's going to get some time on an Anthony Edwards. So his defensive presence and component is also important to this team. And I think he's a guy worth watching because his minutes have gone up steadily throughout the year to where he's a 20-minute rotational player on a defending champion that's expected to fill a spot that Bruce Brown gave them in the postseason last year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm actually going to stay on the same team. You had mentioned Christian Braun a little bit ago. I also think that he's one of those versatile guys that can guard 2, 3, sometimes even a 4 because of how physical and how he just gets after it on the defensive side. He does a lot of things fairly well. My thing with Christian is again the energy that he provides that Nuggets team when he's on a roll. It sparks the whole crowd. And to me, there was various times last year during the playoffs, even as a rookie, when he would get these spot minutes. And he would do the most with those spot minutes, and to the point where the other team just felt like it was he was a nuisance out there. and as the season's gone on, you mentioned Peyton Watson, formerly UCLA product, and then there's another guy, Julian Strother, who I thought at the beginning of the season, had a lot of potential, could shoot the lights out, just hasn't really gotten those opportunities of late. I think those three guys, as you move forward, even if it's not just this season, as you move forward the next season and beyond, they have the potential for growth to a point where the Nuggets might not miss too much of a beat should other guys in their current rotation start to fall off. And so I think Christian Braun's got a lot of potential. When he came out of Kansas, I didn't really know what his role was going to be because he was kind of in between positions as well. You could make an argument that he was between a 1 or a 2 or a 2 and a 3. You didn't know what he was going to be. He gets to this level, he's kind of just a dog at the 2 and a 3 position. He can get after you at a variety of different levels. Offensively, he's not the greatest shooter in the world, but he attacks the rim very, very hard. He will get those loose balls, kind of like a Josh Okogie kind of player, where he'll give you those second chances because of his effort alone, and that's what keeps him in the rotation. So Christian Braun, to me, he was my last guy that I wanted to talk about. I think he's a very good player. 7 points, 3.5 rebounds right now. Only as an assist in the game, but he does the most with what he's given, and I think that's a pretty good trait to have if you're going to be under the radar and really produce.
My only comment on that one is last year, and I was very familiar with him coming out. I was excited about watching him play as a pro, and he had a little bit of, as all rookies, a little bit of up and down year. He actually then he was better for them in the postseason. Like he had impactful stretches of minutes in the playoffs, which told me a lot about Christian Braun. That tells you a lot. Like if you've had an uneven season, minutes wise, some nights you're needed, some nights you're not, struggle a little bit with your shooting. And now you get to the biggest stages on a team that's trying to win a championship, and you actually have moments where you're thrust out there and you get it done. That told me a lot about like what he's made of. And I think you're right. This is going to be an interesting postseason for him. So we got a couple dudes off Denver's bench that I think are going to be very important for them. All right, my next one is a guy that I kind of had an appreciation for him because I'm a shooter and he's primary in the league and people view him as a shooter. This year, I have totally taken on a different view of this player, Grayson Allen. Grayson Allen, to me, and look, he had a lot of baggage, and some people are never going to forget some of that stuff, right? The tripping stuff in college, and then he had the hard takedown foul. Who was that he ripped to the ground? It was a Caruso,
Caruso,
Alex Caruso, right? So that play, and some people say he's just got one of those faces. He drives you crazy, like the look on his face, like whatever, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm in this camp. Like I could look beyond that because I played in the league. And I'm like, look at this guy, like, okay, but I appreciate as a player, what he is. This year, here's what he's done for me in viewing him. Number one, dude is tough as nails. Tough as nails. And when he keeps it clean, and you're not talking about this other stuff, the dude is tough, physically tough. He competes on both ends of the floor. He is a good defensive player. He's strong. He's got a ton of want to. He's quick enough. And he's just physically got the profile that he likes to guard, and he's impactful on that end of the floor. So that's first. Secondly, he is much more than just a spot-up three-point shooter. Mm-hmm. He puts it on the deck pretty good. Like, he's not going to do something flashy with his handle and get you rocking and go one direction when you go the other. That's not what I'm talking about. But he can put it on the deck on a quick catch, swing through, go, and he can get to the rim quickly to finish. And then finally, he had a game, I believe, with 14 assists like this month for Phoenix on a night when he only took like 4 shots as a spot up 3-point shooter. And it wasn't like his night. Like they were face guarding him and all kinds of stuff and not leaving him. So, okay, well, I'm going to take advantage of the other opportunities that are here for me. And he's able to put it down and find people. And I look at his like shooting splits, 51 from the field, 48 from the 3, 89 from the line. Doesn't get there a ton, but 89 from the line. And just the other components of the playmaking and the ability to guard, add all that up, you got a dude that has started 49 games for the Phoenix Suns. And look, those top 3 guys get so much attention. Most people, if I said, who is the Phoenix Suns' 4th leading scorer, most people would say, what difference does it make? They're getting 75 points out of those 3 guys. But that's who it is. It's Grayson Allen. He's the next guy on the list as a 49-game starter. That gives you a lot more than just a guy out there standing around catching and shooting and hunting down 3-point shots. And I just think he's going to be very important for the Phoenix Suns in this playoff stretch because of his ability to guard and help Booker and Beal, because he can guard those same players they have to if they're in foul trouble. And on the other end of the floor, be that pressure release guy that can have a game maybe in a first, second, third round series where he makes 6, 7 threes in one of those games. And I bet he will, because he's going to get some opportunities. And that is just a huge thing and hard to overcome when you've got so many other things to deal with and trying to guard their top 3 guys.
I didn't want to bring up Grayson Allen because I didn't want to be a homer, but I love me some Grayson Allen. So I appreciate you bringing him up because I totally agree with you, Legs. I think Grayson Allen probably has the most potential of any player in the league to be able to take over a game from the perimeter for sure. But to your point about not being just a 3-point shooter, I think the thing I've been surprised about Grayson on is he's been such a great facilitator, and he's been really careful with the ball in games where sometimes the Suns would just turn the ball over too much for my liking, in the upper teens in turnovers, and you just can't have that. But Grayson has been very fundamentally sound throughout, and that's just the way he grew in the game, especially under Coach K. The other thing defensively, I think when you're talking about man-to-man defense, he gives you the effort. I think sometimes, just physically, he's a little outmatched from time to time. But the thing that stood out to me the most about him has been his help defense and his team defense is second to none. He understands the weak side. He understands when to help. He has great instincts defensively when it comes to help defense. And I love Grayson Allen. I probably trust him more than just about any Suns player in terms of taking care of the ball, making the right decision, and moving along. I think the offense flows through Grayson naturally and never stops. The ball never sticks. And I've just been absolutely over the moon excited about what he brought to the table. I did not expect to see myself love a Duke Blue Devil as much as I love Grayson Allen, but here I am. So,
isn't it amazing when those guys end up on your team? Like there were guys like that in the league when I played on other teams, and you couldn't stand them. And then they show up in your locker room one day and they put on the same jersey as you, and you are glad to have them on your team.
For sure. Do you have anybody else you want to point out?
No, that's it. I think we wanted to talk about some of these rookies, right? So, but we have enough time to probably get to a few of those guys. So let's move on to rookie report. And the way you and I, okay, go ahead.
Well, before you do, we do have 3 super chats I just want to throw
Okay,
out
yeah,
before you get on to the
yeah,
rookies,
gotta get
okay?
to the super chats. Yes.
J Money 4.99 super chat. Legs with that practice story that was super interesting. Did the guys that stayed back and practice and kept practicing grown your own separate bond on some level? Did you guys grow a bond on some level for the guys that stayed back as opposed to the guys that said, I'm out if the coaches are out?
Yes, I did feel that. Honestly, I did. It was kind of one of those moments, man. It kind of defined who you were. And you looked around and it was a foxhole type mentality situation. And you want to know who's in the foxhole with you because that was a very difficult situation we were going through. And the guys that stayed behind knew we had to get something done. And yeah, it was a physical practice. There was even a fight that broke out in that session. A quick one that we stopped. This is the frustration level the guys were feeling. But you definitely came out of that and you had a little bit of a renewed appreciation for some of the guys that you're playing with that knew that they were taking the same approach you were. And it meant a lot.
That's awesome. 2 super chats from Cycle Blue. The first one, $10. Appreciate you, Cycle Blue. Basketball Cthulhu appreciates former son Legler keeping the discussions honest. Exciting times ahead. And then his second one says, by the way, Tim, nice to see another RVA native put in that work in the league, especially in the media. 804, baby.
804, baby. West End, Richmond. J.R. Tucker High School. Yeah, man, I love it. So we moved, just quick story. We moved from Baltimore to Richmond when I was 12 years old. And it was a big deal because sports were my life. And, I kind of knew what my path was going to be in Baltimore, where I was going to go to high school and all that. It was all set. And then we moved. Dad had a work-related thing, so we moved. And that was a tough time for me. And sports are the greatest way to reincorporate yourself to incorporate yourself into a new environment, right? And that's what it did. I made my first good friends in Little League tryouts that year, and then eventually, made my way to Tucker High School, and I left there as the all-time leading scorer in the history of the school. And to this day, I have great friendships from that area. My sister still lives down there. My mom was till my mom passed last summer, but she was still there. So I was in Richmond, 3-4 times a year, seeing my family. My sister's still there, so it's always to me gonna be, and I was only there from the age of 12 to the age of 17. I went off to college and I kind of never lived in Richmond again full time. But for me, that was such a critical time in my life. I will always refer to that as like the one place that really felt like home to me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Listen, we all have those areas where we grow up and maybe we identify with those more than others. And Richmond sounds like a pretty cool place for you. So that's pretty dope. The other players that we're going to talk about right now, kind of in the same vein, where maybe we looked at this NBA draft, and obviously there was about 2 or 3 guys that stood out at the very top, and Emma's going to bring up this graphic of last year's draft. Obviously we've talked about the Wembys, we talk about the Brandon Millers, Scoot Henderson was largely talked about coming in, but we're going to refrain from talking about those guys specifically, and even Jaime Jaquez, he's gotten a lot of love of late.
And even Chet Holmgren, who was drafted the year before, but technically a rookie. So we're going to leave him out of the equation as well.
So Tim, you wanted to point out some rookies that you think have been, pleasantly surprising. Who do you got first?
All right, I'm going to start this off with a guy that I've become more familiar with here lately, because beginning of the year, I wasn't really necessarily paying as much attention to this team. They had their fortunes and their season turn around. It's the Utah Jazz, and it's Keyonte George. Man, oh man, if they found a player. He has got so much swag and confidence and burst, and he's just got a ton of talent. He's averaging 25 minutes a game on a team that's now become relevant, right? They're now, they're thinking play-in situation. Early in the year, if you recall, they were at a point where the rumors were their record was so bad that they're going to break this whole thing up. And they were actually talking about, is Lauri Markkanen going to be available? I remember we did a whole show talking about Lauri Markkanen going to Oklahoma City and like, what would it take? And what would that do pairing him with Shea and Chet and those guys? And it turns out right after that conversation, they start winning games at a really high level. And now they're like really fun, very interesting. They can put up big numbers. And they're in the mix in the West for like a play-in spot. So their season is not disregarded anymore. And Keyonte George in 50 games, he has started 19 of those, 25 minutes a game. He is averaging just under 12 points a game, 4 assists a game, 40% from the field. So that's got to come up a little bit. Obviously 35 from the 3, 82 from the line. So his shooting splits will improve. the most important thing is that, this is a guy who's got good size, 6'4", quick, athletic, gives them a guard that's, I think, multidimensional. And for where he was picked in the draft, I think they got a steal.
Yeah, no, I agree. He actually played against the Suns earlier in the season, and in the first half against the Suns, he was unguardable. He hit, I think, about 3 or 4 threes, but his drive was unstoppable. His pull-up was unstoppable. Him getting to the rim was unstoppable. Like, the Suns just did not have a guy that could guard him at the moment. He kind of faded away in the second half, but I thought that first half was really impressive. And so being able to see him up close like that, I was like, okay, that is definitely somebody to take note of. I totally agree. Another player that I've really taken note of, because we've played the Mavericks twice now, and I didn't really know much about this guy. Even in the draft, I really didn't really pay too much attention to him. But Dereck Lively, man, talk about go up and get it. He's been a valuable asset for that Mavs team, especially after losing some of the size that they did over the last year. They tried to toy around with JaVale McGee, and it just didn't really work. But now you have a younger, fresher guy in Dereck Lively who can go up and get it. He's averaging 9 and 8 right now. He's very efficient at the rim. Defensively, he's a problem because he's going to block a lot of shots. He's going to get in your way. I think he has been a nuisance. And when you're talking about guys that are perimeter-based, or at least mid-range to perimeter-based, and can have such high skill levels like a Kyrie and like a Luka, and with the vision of those two, to be able to just throw up these lobs and find your big in good positions, and that they're going to take care of the ball. Dereck Lively has been very, very impressive to me this season, and I think he can hold up in the playoffs for that Mavs team, who's going to need some size to be able to combat some of the bigs in the West, like your Jokic's and stuff like that. So very interested to see his growth and development as we move forward.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to that. I agree with everything you said. He's a great compliment to Luka because of the pick and dive game and Luka's ability to just throw it up there and have him go get it. We were concerned about the Mavericks' size. They addressed it with Lively, but then it's like, okay, is that enough? They went out and they got Daniel Gafford. And so now, like, I look at them in the middle and say, at no point in the game do they have to go without a stud athlete in the middle that can not only catch lobs and finish around the back, because both of those guys do that. They both protect the rim. They're super active defensively. They can jump out, get beat by the guard on a switch or a hedge, but still be athletic enough to track them all the way to the rim and still get a piece of it as they lay it up on the glass. So now you have it's a two-headed monster in the pivot. And so every night, the way you have to evaluate production for the Mavericks, you have to add those two guys together, because that's what they're getting out of the center spot. Like, in a lot of nights, that's going to be 20 and 10 plus production, 3-4 blocks, 6 to 8 offensive rebounds. They're perfect fits for that team and what they need and the reward that they get from Luka. Because that's the one thing he does promote. He will promote you to cut harder, run harder, because the ball will find you. And so I think that's a good one on your part. All right, the next guy I'm going to go with is Brandin Podziemski. And a lot of people are probably starting to become more aware of him because the Warriors are one of those teams, right? Everybody wants to watch them still because of the Steph show. And so you've been noticing Podziemski, but I want to just kind of give my take on what I'm seeing in this guy. First of all, 19th pick in the draft. So where he was drafted relative to what he's doing for them, an absolute steal. Give them credit. And I remember talking to them in the preseason. I talked to Michael Dunleavy Jr. right after the pick, because they were heading into camp, and he was like saying, like, they were so excited that he was there when they picked. And at the time you're thinking, like, okay, that's what everybody's going to say about their first pick, 19th pick. I didn't know much about him, honestly. Well, I do now. Here's the thing that I know. He has made the transition, potentially going forward, at least right before the break, of Klay Thompson to maybe come off the bench in a new role. Like, they did that the last game before the break. It was Klay's best game of the year. Something was unleashed in him. He was more relaxed. He embraced it, to his credit. I gave him a lot of credit for mentally wrapping his head around it, a player of that level. He's only 34 years old. It's like the guy that his running mate still looks the same, and now they're asking me to come off the bench. That is not easy. And he totally embraced it, got his mind right, had a great game. Well, the only reason that that's even possible is because of Brandin Podziemski, that they can put a guy out there that not only can score. I think he's, averaging on the year, like the month of February, let's go with that, recent numbers. He's averaging 13 in the month of February. So he can score. And more importantly, 7 assists a night, almost 8 rebounds a game. He's just one of those ball hawks. When you watch Brandin Podziemski and the number of balls he runs down as long rebounds on either end of the floor, and the tough ones he gets where he gets a guy on his back that's 3 inches taller when the shot goes up, and he's not even trying to hunt the foul. He's going after the ball, grabbing it, gets his hands on it. It's his. He just is one of those guys that's got a total nose for that. Those are winning plays. And his ability to just move the ball and get it hopping. He understands team offense. He understands the intricacies of that system. He's a perfect guy to plug in right now while you figure out what this is going to mean for Klay Thompson going forward. So Podziemski, to me, has been an absolute revelation. And with the 19th pick to get this kind of production and this level player going forward, kudos to the Golden State Warriors front office for getting that right.
Totally agree. I have him on my list as well. The thing about him is, the DNA between him and Gary Payton II are almost identical in terms of their effort and the way they get after it. He's been very impressive because, you start to look at the future of the Warriors with Klay, Steph, and where they're going in their careers. And obviously Steph is probably going to hang around a little bit longer than Klay. But I thought Brandon coming in at this time, learning from those two, and then taking the reins as fast as he did and really taking control at times of these games has been very impressive. He attacks the rim very well on the offensive side, but on the defensive side, he gets after it too. And he doesn't back down from just about anybody. He's a nuisance when the Warriors are desperate and they try to go full court. It feels like there's 4 guys out there when it's only just him. Putting that pressure on the guards on the other team. And so very impressive guy, 9-6-4 over the season. But as you mentioned, 13-8-7 in the last month. He's getting better progressively as the season goes along. And he's a very reliable guy. And he's been reliable ever since they lost Chris Paul in the lineup. It's been, hey, let's plug this guy in. And he's filled that role just fine. He's helped stem the tide from the loss of Chris Paul until he comes back, and then also the demotion of Klay to the bench. And if you don't have a guy like that, as you mentioned, you're going to be sinking. The last guy I'm going to bring up is a second-round pick, and I know you got a second-round pick that you're going to talk about as well. But to me, he was one of my favorite players because he got drafted by the Suns at the time, but then traded in the DeAndre Ayton trade to Portland. Toumani Camara, to me, he's been fantastic. I really like this kid. When I saw him in the summer league, I thought, man, he's bigger than he looks on TV. He gets after it. He plays with tremendous effort. His shot needs a little bit of work, just a little bit more consistency, but he's getting better and better every single week, every single month, every single opportunity he gets. He's averaging 7, 5, and 1 for the Trailblazers, and he's had some bigger games throughout the season. Toumani is a little bit, he gives me Boris Diaw vibes in terms of his versatility. He's not as great a passer as Diaw, but when it comes to everything else, defensively, offensively, there's not one thing that really stands out above everything else, but he does everything at a very high level. And I just really like his demeanor, the way he goes about the game. He really cares about the game. He wants to improve. Just a big fan of Toumani Camara for sure. And I think Portland got a steal.
That's a great one. And I'm going to move on to, because we don't have much time. I'll just touch on quickly the other guy. Because if you look at the entire second round, I would say this year, cumulative production out of those 30 picks is less than normal. There hasn't been a lot. That's clearly, Kamara is definitely the guy at the top of the list. I'd say the next guy on the list probably is Trayce Jackson-Davis for Golden State. And he's not playing as much over the last month, but he had a stretch where he was consistently playing double-digit minutes for them, and he may get that opportunity again. He's played 40 games on the year, started 3 of those, 13 minutes a night, 6 points, 4 boards in 13 minutes, and more importantly, gives them a little bit of size and athletic ability up front. They don't have a lot of that. I mean, they got Kevon Looney, who is their center, but he's not athletic. Then they've got Draymond Green, who does everything, but he's 6'6". So this guy is one of the few guys they have on their roster that plays, that's actually got some length to him that they're going to desperately need if they get involved in any sort of play-in or a actual series against one of these teams that have athletic bigs up front or long wings or a big center. They're going to need minutes out of him. So the pickings were kind of slim when you look at the second round and who's actually having an imprint right now. And that's not to say some of these guys might not break out, down the road. That's possible. But I'm just talking about just looking at raw numbers right now this year, impacting teams. These are probably the two guys at the top of the list.
Absolutely. Listen, man, there's a lot of guys that are under the radar. They're rookies. They're contributing highly to their teams. The second half of this season, man, I really can't wait for Thursday to start, man, because we just need some ball back. We need some good competitive ball back, Legs, more than anything, because after this weekend, there was a little bad taste in my mouth. So, Legs, I really appreciate you, man. 2 days. That was fun. Thanks for having me on the show with you.
Love having you on, man. Look forward to the next time. Yeah.
And then Thursday, my counterpart from PHNX Suns, Gerald Bourget, will be joining Legs as well. So you can tune in for that. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe if you haven't already. Follow Legs on Twitter at LegsESPN. You can follow me on Twitter at Saul_Bookman. And you can follow the show at ALLCITY NBA on Twitter as well. So Legs, until next time, appreciate you, man. Peace.
Got it. Yeah.
City like the mayor.